There was more to The Last Starfighter than just another space adventure. As the first movie to forego miniatures in favor of fully animated computer-generated dogfights, the production almost failed. But beneath the starships and the arcade glow, it was pixel-perfect anarchy. The star we ended up with was by no means the first pick. A particularly gloomy sequence was toned down in order to maintain a PG classification. As well as the filmmaker? He used to wear Michael Myers' mask. The Last Starfighter has 20 strange facts. And among the gloom and fear, a single high score transformed a gamer into the last hope for the galaxy. This was not merely science fiction, the future was rewritten by the daydream. The first one. The idea for The Last Starfighter was conceived among the flashing lights of an arcade rather than in a studio boardroom. As screenwriter Jonathan R. Betchell watched a youngster chase a high score with his eyes fixed on the screen and perspiration on his brow, he wondered, what if this wasn't simply a game? Could it be a test? An instrument for hiring? That idea turned to become the movie's hook. When a trailer park boy named Alex Rogan beats the game, he discovers it's a covert test to identify starfighters for a galactic conflict. Even Universal paused at the idea's audacity, but the early 1980s arcade frenzy made it unavoidable. Batul's narrative transformed the fascination of children across who were feeding quarters into machines into their fate. A high score, a luminous screen, and a joystick. That was all that was required to unlock the stars. 2. In early drafts, Alex Rogan's story took place in a lush suburb with picket fences and well-kept lawns, but Universal was concerned that it was too similar to E.T., another boy who lives next door and dreams of the stars. Thus, screenwriter Jonathan Betchell took a risk. Alex was left off at a dirty trailer park. When Alex abruptly found himself surrounded by alien armadas in cosmic warfare, it produced a dramatic contrast, gave the film grit, and grounded his family in working-class struggle. In addition, the trailer park brought in neighbors who applauded his victory in Starfighter, who considered him their own. It felt more heroic, more isolated, and larger than his jump towards the stars in that tiny, grounded world. Not that Alex was fleeing the suburbs. He was fleeing a future that seemed fixed, monotony, and poverty. The final Starfighter gained its heart and edge from such environment. Lance Guest was not the studio's original choice, but he ended up becoming Alex Rogan. Want a young star who could serve as the movie's brand ambassador. During his Family Ties breakout, Michael J. Fox was a contender, but his comedy schedule prevented him from being selected. Before landing Mask, Eric Stoltz also made a quick trip back to the future. Maggie's function was also uncertain. It was landed by Catherine Mary Stewart after names like Jennifer Jason Leigh circulated around. Due of the indisputable chemistry with Guest. Authenticity prevailed in the end, not the trendiest names. Even though Stewart and Guest weren't yet famous, they were credible together. Two young lovers, stranded in a small village, are abruptly entangled in something far more significant. Instead of creating celebrities, the casting brought the plot to life. Fourth, prior to Nick Castle joining, Universal pursued James Cameron, a new filmmaker who had recently rocked Hollywood. After completing The Terminator, Cameron was eager to work on his next major science fiction film. His potential to lead The Last Starfighter briefly appeared, but schedule conflicts and Cameron's aspirations drew him away. Instead, he abandoned Starfighter to Castle and plunged into Aliens and the Abyss. It's a fascinating hypothetical scenario. Last Starfighter under James Cameron might have been more gritty, dark, and technically ambitious. Rather, the movie managed to strike a balance between innovative computer graphics and Nick Castle's idyllic idealism. History splintered at that point, a view extremely distinct from Cameron's signature ferocity. The aliens Cameron created were abyssal and titans. Castle created a video game that was well received. Was Chris Columbus adamant about staying at home? What if the Wright brothers believed that only birds should be able to fly? Were the Yulus too hideous for Goloka to save? Goloka is who? Ignore it. 5. The Last Starfighter was not the only film that Nick Castle directed. He was something completely different to horror enthusiasts. The Halloween mask-wearing dude. Castle had been a buddy of John Carpenter's from college. Carpenter also called Castle to provide Michael Myers with a silent, intimidating presence. Beneath that mask, Castle transformed into one of the most iconic figures in horror, the Shape. However, he made his own jump in 1984. From anonymous murderer to sci-fi fantasist, he replaced Carpenter's shadows with computer-generated starlight in The Last Starfighter, demonstrating his ability to transition from frightening minimalism to high-concept spectacle. It added a unique pulse to the movie. The man who frightened audiences now created a tale about destiny, love, and hope while remaining anonymous and pursuing the stars. The sixth number. The majority of space combat in 1984 was still conducted using model ships on wires and miniatures captured against starfields. All of that was abandoned by The Last Starfighter. Rather, it bet on a completely unproven form of computer graphics. The film lasts for 27 minutes. Instead of a model shop, almost all of the ships in Dogfight were constructed within a machine. It was one of just 6 Cray XMP supercomputers in the world. With almost 250,000 polygons each frame, much more than viewers had ever seen, the Gunstar appeared less like a toy on strings and more like a digital dream taken directly from an arcade screen. But the miracle almost fell apart. Animators nearly choked on the computers when they attempted to portray the spinning Death Blossom, the Gunstar's ultimate weapon. The Cray crashed repeatedly under the weight of its own ambition as the whirl of light trails and explosions pushed it to the breaking point. Hollywood marketed it as being quicker and less expensive than models. The real thing? It was delicate, erratic, and hardly held together. It did, however, work against the odds. The future of film was altered by that gamble, opening the door for Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, and all subsequent digital battlegrounds. The Gunstar was the first to use computer-generated imagery, CGI, in motion pictures. Seventh. It was intended for the power-hungry villain Jur to demonstrate his brutality in one gory manner. By using his scepter to destroy a spy's brain in real time on a huge screen. The entire scenario was captured on camera, including the writhing body and luminous skin. However, director Nick Castle withdrew it. Just a flash of blood on the victim's forehead was all that was left of the scene in order to protect the PG ratings. In the editing bay, what would have been one of the most sinister PG moments of the 1980s disappeared? What was the irony? Just weeks prior to the PG-13 ratings arrival, the final Starfighter was released. The entire scene may have been preserved if Castle had waited. Instead, a blink-and-you'll-miss-it picture was used to capture one of the most startling scenes in the movie. 8th place. Centauri's star car appeared on TV as though it had been lifted from pulp sci-fi. Bright, futuristic, and sleek. On set, however, it was a nightmare. The car was awkwardly sluggish, noisy, and clumsy. Crews had to struggle with the mechanics each time it needed to make a big entry in order to get it moving straight forward. What appeared to be effortless speed on video was frequently a patchwork of precise camera angles and editing techniques, and the fiberglass body rattled and the gaudy gullwing doors stuck. Subsequently, Nick Castle acknowledged that shooting with the automobile was more frustrating than enjoyable. In actuality, it was not roadworthy, despite being a cosmic hot rod designed for the screen. The charm of The Last Starfighter symbolized magnificent in concept, awkward in implementation. Robert Preston was the only man in mind when writing number 9, Centauri, the cunning recruiter who entices Alex into the stars. He was well known to audiences as Harold Hill, the blustery salesman with a glitter in his eye from The Music Man. Centauri, a con artist who became a cosmic guide, was basically Hill reincarnated in space. The job held significant meaning for Preston. It turned into a stardust-wrapped curtain call, his last theatrical act. His charisma and theatrical timing provided the final Starfighter its vitality, bringing classic Hollywood elegance to the computer-generated imagery show. Centauri's departure in his ostentatious star vehicle was more than just a character getting out. A Broadway icon recast as a salesperson amid the stars gave Preston his last bow. Goodbye, Alex. Have fun. 10th. Wil Wheaton came very close to making his debut in The Last Starfighter before he became Wesley Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation. In the trailer park, he taped a few lines that hung about Alex Rogan's universe while playing Lewis's pal. But almost none of his scenes were left in the film when it came out. Without knowing to look, Wheaton was reduced to a hazy background kid. He was technically in the film, his family joked, but the big break never materialized. Wheaton signed with Stand By Me 2 years later, then Star Trek. The child who got lost in the editing room ended up becoming a sci-fi legend. Evidence that sometimes your unmemorable roles are merely stepping stones to the ones that transform your life. 11. As children streamed out of theaters in 1984, they all had the same dream: to play an arcade game. Alex Rogan had risen to fame on screen after winning the Starfighter cabinet. They must have believed that there must be a real machine waiting in bowling alleys and pizza parlors. Atari even hinted at it in the movie's credits and created functional prototypes that mirrored the space battles in the movie, complete with glowing controllers and gameplay. But before it could reach the arcade floor, the dream died. After Atari was devastated by the 1983 video game meltdown, the release was cancelled. Fans spent years following rumors about a game that never existed after the prototypes vanished into warehouses. Finally, a NES cartridge bearing the final Starfighter moniker surfaced 6 years later. However, it was a terrible trick, not the epic dogfights that children had dreamed of, but a redesigned version of Uridium, another game. No opportunity to test your luck, no arcade rollout, just an urban tale with a phony console tie-in. It was a glowing promise that was never kept, and for gamers, it became one of the worst disappointments in film history. It was never intended to be more than a passing joke about Alex Rogan's android counterpart, the Beta unit, who was abandoned on Earth. While the real Alex battled in the stars, the awkward stand-in struggled through small-town life. Test viewers, however, adored Beta's clumsy humor when they viewed early edits. His peculiar grin, his unsteady gait, and his attempts and failures to imitate human behavior. Everyone always laughed at it. Filmmakers paid attention. New sequences were added to Beta's role. It was a success for the viewers. Lance Guest thought it was hell. He was forced to wear a stiff wig that never looked good in the light because he had already chopped off his hair by the time reshoots came around. He almost passed out from the heat trapping caused by the thick, heated prosthesis. It felt like torment to spend every day in that latex because Guest was ill for a large portion of the shoot. Beta was a comedy relief character and a beloved oddity on cinema. In the background, he was rubber in sorrow. The fact that Guest later joked that Beta almost broke him is evidence that the things that make us laugh on television frequently originate from the suffering of others. Lewis, go back to sleep, or I'll break the news of your playboys to Ma. Alex, you're wasting your time. Why the fuck? I'm going to tell them everything about your playboys, so go back to sleep, Lewis. 13. At one point, Alex and Maggie weren't just Alex and Maggie. The names they were given in early drafts, Skip and Penny, made them sound more like cartoon characters than actual teenagers. It irritated director Nick Castle. It wasn't a campy comic strip to him. It concerned two normal children who were placed in exceptional situations. He advocated for more realistic names that were appropriate for the small-town trailer park environment. The adjustment was successful. It sounded like you might truly know Alex and Maggie. You might see children in a corner cafe or gas station. By reminding viewers that beneath the CGI dogfights and alien battles, this was still a love story between two small-town dreamers, their names served to ground the fantasy in reality. Number 14. A daring concept nearly resulted in the most unique studio logo in Hollywood history for the final Starfighter. Rylos is the alien planet at the center of the plot, and the creators intended to replace Universal's iconic globe with it. By blending the boundaries between the studio's identity and the movie environment, the goal was to immerse viewers directly in space. Nevertheless, Universal officials objected. They were worried that it would confound viewers and violate one of the most important branding guidelines. Don't alter the logo at all. After the plan was abandoned, Earth was included in the movie's opening. The film's outsider vibe could have been solidified from the very first shot thanks to this small what-if. Rather of taking any chances, the movie waited for Rylos to emerge among the stars. In 1984, viewers had never seen anything like the famous starship of the final Starfighter, number 15, the Gunstar. Ron Cobb, a visionary artist who had previously influenced Back to the Future, Conan the Barbarian, and Alien, created the design. It wasn't made from model pieces like the Star Wars ships were. The entire design and rendering process was done on a computer. Cobb used sleek, angular symmetry in his design, which worked well on the digital canvas. The Gunstar seemed like the future when it was depicted in the computer-generated imagery. Scenes of the movie, a ship made of polygons rather than glue and plastic. For moviegoers, it joined the X-Wing as one of the first genuinely digital icons. The Millennium Falcon, too. The Gunstar battled its way into film history rather than merely participating in a galactic conflict. 16th. Through The Last Starfighter, Tron's DNA pumped. Bringing their digital skills to Universal, many of the visual effects artists had recently completed Disney's groundbreaking 1982 experiment. Rylos and its alien armada's appearance was influenced by even unutilized alien concept ideas that infiltrated the mix. The unique style of The Last Starfighter was derived from this heritage. Shiny, a bit weird, and arcade-like. The filthy, inhabited Star Wars universe didn't appear to be there. It had the appearance of a video game that was brought to life. Though controversial at the time, its decision ultimately strengthened the film's distinctive character. The attempt to be Star Wars was not made. It was a new and shiny thing that was decades ahead of its time. Your fan base is small and dispersed. The Star League. We are ready to be on an equal footing and a haven for weaker worlds. 17th. The Last Starfighter was given the Marvel Comics treatment, just as Labyrinth, Blade Runner, and Raiders of the Lost Arkansas. The story of the film was brought to life in vibrant, colorful panels in a 3-issue adaptation published by Marvel in 1984. It was the only option for a lot of fans to recreate the adventure once the film came out. In order to capitalize on the pulpy, cosmic flavor that Marvel excelled on, the adaptation used Ron Cobb's sleek ship designs and even prolonged several scenes. As a reminder of how comic book stores previously carried the torch for movies that hadn't yet been released on VHS, the miniseries eventually turned into a collectible relic of 1980s sci-fi marketing. It was appropriate that the afterlife of a film with arcade DNA resided in a different medium where creativity was unrestricted. I now require ear surgery. Here, I'm dying. What is happening? You are experiencing a horrible nightmare. Sleep again. Hey Lewis. 18th. The final Starfighter was intended to be Universal's own Star Wars. Toys, sequels, and a vast merchandising empire were among the studio's dreams. High standards were defined, prototypes were drawn, and tie-in goods were planned. Executives wanted blockbuster numbers, but the box office didn't deliver. With $28.7 million globally, the movie doubled its $15 million budget. In contrast to George Lucas' Empire, however, it appeared to be a little alteration. Toys disappeared before manufacture, merchandise plans failed, and the anticipated brand faltered. The Last Starfighter, despite its lofty goals, was unable to shake the lingering effects of Star Wars. It was an undiscovered cult tale rather than a galaxy-dominating empire. Initially, it appeared that The Last Starfighter would eventually disappear. In the busy summer of 1984, it was a modest sci-fi oddity that wasn't a disaster but also wasn't a smash. Then cable and VHS arrived. Late at night, reruns. It was found at home by audiences who missed it in theaters, rewinding the arcade-style combat, imitating Robert Preston's sardonic one-liners, and dreaming of high scores that could change their life. The forgotten experiment turned into a cult classic by the 1990s. Many saw it as more than simply another science fiction movie. They believed computers might create worlds as vast as their imaginations thanks to the film. The Last Starfighter won the long run, but it never won the box office. In the light of TVs, VCRs, and the hearts of the admirers who discovered it there, it continues to live on. 20. The Last Starfighter received an unexpected encore 20 years after its premiere, not on screen, but on stage. Storm Theater in New York remade the interstellar adventure as a campy, full-fledged musical in 2004. Leaning into the film's pulpy charm, the production featured chorus songs that echoed arcade bleeps, duets about destiny, and interstellar ballads. Though it didn't have to be, it wasn't a Broadway giant. The musical proved that the final Starfighter had established a cult following that was capable of transcending genres, according to fans. Advanced computer-generated imagery had already been used to depict the gunsters' fights. They were now performed in front of spotlights, a strange yet poignant reminder that the film's creativity was too vast to be contained within a single medium. What are we going to do? We're dead. Seth Rogen and Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment were among the well-known figures who expressed interest in the movie, but studio hesitancy and legal issues kept it on the ground. Pitch ideas were put out and scripts were written, but nothing was approved for release. Nevertheless, fans never gave up hope. A cult classic with nostalgic appeal and cutting-edge computer graphics, The Last Starfighter seems like a strong contender in an era of innumerable revivals, ready to complete the work that 1984 began. The dream refuses to die, even if Alex Rogan never made it back to the Gunstar on film. Every new pitch and every rumor keeps the cockpit warm. The Last Starfighter, which started out as an arcade daydream, was one of the first movies to demonstrate that computers could create worlds as realistic as models in matte paintings. Almost James Cameron, almost Michael J. Fox, and it carried near misses while pushing through brittle technology that could have failed at any moment. It provided sci-fi lovers a cult treasure that found a second life on VHS, cable, and late-night replays, and it bid Robert Preston farewell to Stardust. It never succeeded Star Wars. However, perhaps that was the purpose. Because of its diminutive size, tenacity, and unfamiliarity, it was remembered. If you have ever sat in front of an arcade machine and wished it was more than just a game, this is for you. Please leave a remark. Which cult masterpiece should we start with next, in your opinion? Since the top score isn't always displayed on a screen. A story's legacy is what it is.